Yes, thank you, everyone. So we stopped here last time. Let's have a little overlap to continue. So in our ignorance, the ignorance of the mind, not really knowing who we truly are, everything appears to be veiled. All that we get to know is always in bits and pieces. And we never really get to know the large picture, the whole picture. So to perishable creatures' eyes, to our physical eyes, to also our inner vision, whatever in limited capacity it opens, all this manifestation, the creation, the whole play, it veers to our perishable eyes, the grandeur of a useless miracle. It appears as if it's all just purposeless. There is no purpose to the whole of existence. It's just going on and on and on and on, just toiling itself over eons and centuries, wasting itself that it may last a while. Referring to also how planets, they're just burning themselves up so that they can go on for a while. How stars and millions of galaxies, they're just there, and in time, over time, they just burn themselves up, the energy, and slowly they kind of vanish into the dark space, wasting itself that it may last a while, a river that can never find its sea. So, as if all the movement that we see in manifestation is like a flowing movement of energy, which can really never truly reach its culmination. Where is it wanting to go? Where is it wanting to submerge itself? Finally, what is the ultimate destination? It runs through life and death on an edge of time. The edge of time is the present moment, day by day, step by step, one goes on and on and on, going from life to that, goes on and on, this river of manifestation of creation. A fire in the night is its mighty actions blaze. And all this appears as if in this pitch darkness of the whole space that is there, as if in the middle of this vastness, this fire is ablaze, and one has no idea, no clue of what is the true purpose of it being there, because one cannot make sense of this being there. And now he shares what is the need of us being here. This is our deepest need, to join once more. So we'll read these lines starting from today. Yeah, so whoever feels ready, please read these lines in yellow.
This is our deepest need to join once more. What now is parted, opposite and twain, remote in sovereign spheres that never meet, or fronting like far poles of night and day.
Yes, so we live in a world of duality, pleasure, pain, life, death, black, white, good, bad, spiritual, non-spiritual. Even when we turn to spirituality, there also we make divisions. What is spiritual? What is not spiritual? So we live in a world of duality. If we are saying yes to something, definitely I'm saying no to something else. Yeah. So it's a world of where I cannot really synthesize, just like Sri Aurobindo talks of synthesizing all the aspects of reality into one truth. How we live in our life is we always are for something, and then by effect we are against something. So there is a world of duality in which we live. If we are saying no to something, definitely I'm saying yes to something else. If I'm friend with somebody, then definitely I'm not friend with somebody else. Yeah. So this is the world of duality in which we live, running towards pleasure, running away from pain, wanting more and more good and not wanting the bad. So we live like this. We cannot help. The mortal realm is a world of duality at the moment. But we are not content there. There is a discontent also, if we can sense within, as if there is something missing, something could be much proper, much right. This is not the way it should be ideally. So this discontent is what drives us forward. This is our deepest need, to join once more what now is parted, opposite, and twain. So although we live in a world of duality, for us, if I am in meditation, beautiful. But when I'm in day-to-day life, again, I'm again pulled into the troubles and of miseries of my own nature and people around me. So although I don't want to be there, but I do feel bifurcated. Right? So this is our present state of consciousness. And the discontent is precisely there because there is something more which is possible. We have to grow from our inner being has to evolve out of our mortality. The inner being has to grow so that this joining, this conjunction can happen. This joining of dualities, merging of dualities can happen. Remote in sovereign spheres that never meet. Now talk about meeting of evil and good. They seem like opposite poles, as if they are never ever going to meet, never ever going to meet. And they are sovereign in their own spheres. In their own spheres, evil is the king. In their own spheres, good is the king. Yeah. But whenever we try to bring them together, whenever we try to kind of merge the duality, we always see that something or the good, something of the evil always remains. So no matter, the example Shraddha gives here is, I found it very beautiful. The example she gave is, imagine that you have a magnet. In a magnet you always have two poles, the positive pole and the negative pole, the north or the south pole of the magnet also. No matter how short you make the magnet, the poles will always remain. You cannot get rid of the poles. And the closer you get the north to the south pole in a magnet, the positive side to the negative, they will always repel each other. So by their very nature, although in their own sphere they are king of themselves, the positive is the king there and the negative is the king at the other pole, but when you try to bring them together, they repel each other. They are not one with each other. They keep on repelling as if they cannot stand each other. Yeah. So almost like night and day, we see that the day is there, the night seems to be absent. And when the night is there, the day seems to be gone. In our own phases of life, we see the darkness is there. A lot of challenge, lot of psychological disturbance, emotional, lot of darkness is there. Light cannot be seen. And when light is there, the darkness is not there. So as if these are like far poles of dualities which never ever meet. But our deepest need is to join it. Where is this deepest need coming from? This is a remembrance of our truest nature, because our truest nature is of Satchidananda, where everything is one. So in us, there is a remembrance of that oneness. And that's why we struggle so hard in our own little ways to have harmony at our home, harmony within the being, without, in workplace, in other spaces outside. We try hard. That's a different fact that we never arrive at it, because first and foremost, what is needed for that is a psychic transformation in each one of us. Before that, we cannot have true harmony. And psychic is only the first step, then the spiritual transformation, and then the supramental transformation. So the way is long and arduous, but the journey has to begin from each of us. Each individual one has to journey ahead. Yes, this is our deepest need, and he continues to talk about the deepest need further. Yeah, whoever feels ready.
We must fill the immense lacuna we have made, rewed the closed finite's lonely consonant with the open vowels of infinity. A hyphen must connect matter and mind. Thank you.
So lacuna is a gap. Lacuna is a gap, like, for example, maybe you have a writing, like 10 pages of a writing, and a few pages are missing from that writing. So that creates a gap. You cannot make sense of the complete because there is a gap in between. We must fill the immense lacuna we have made. So when we talk of matter and spirit, when we talk of Atma and the body, as if they appear like two poles which cannot ever meet. But Mother and Sri Aurobindo say that it's just because we are not aware of what lies be in between spirit and matter. There are connecting worlds in between spirit and matter. It's not a gap. It's not like there is a jump and then it's like on one end there is matter, there is a huge gap, nothing is there, and then there is spirit. It's not like that. There are phases in between, there are planes of existence in between, of which we are not aware in our mortal existence. Ordinary consciousness, we are not aware of those merging kind of areas in between. So it feels that there is an immense lacuna. To the ordinary consciousness, to us, it appears that there is this very big gap in knowing and living, for example. I know, I read so much, but when I live it out, as if my nature just totally resists all that knowledge that I may have intellectually. So in action, it never fully comes forward. So there is a gap. We must fill the immense lacuna we have made, rewed the closed finite's lonely consonant with the open vowels of infinity. The word the originating word, the first word, also known as Om, A, O, Ma. So there, the speciality of a consonant is that you speak a consonant with your mouth closed. For example, if you are speaking M, so you will close your mouth. You have closed your mouth. You have made it finite. While the other two syllables of A, O, Ma, A is a vowel. O is a vowel. Now, the moment you talk about any vowel, you are speaking it out, your mouth remains open. A, it remains open. O, it remains open, and it goes on and on and on. It can go on. So it is also a reference to the infinite, like it goes on and on, while consonant limits itself. For that, I have to close my lips so that I'm able to speak it. So the finite, how we are caged in our ego consciousness, and hence very limited, very narrow in our consciousness. We have to rewed. We have to join this rewed. He uses a hyphen in between, re-wed. We have to rewed the closed finite's lonely consonant, A, O, Ma, referring to Ma, with the open vowels of infinity, A, O. So as if the Ma, which is referring to the matter, as if it's lying away, and the spirit, which refers to A and O, the open vowels, they are poles apart. So we have to join the syllables of this universal word, A, O, Ma, A, Om, with the open vowels of infinity. A hyphen must connect matter and mind. So something has to be there, some connecting link has to be there, so that matter and mind merge within themselves. They go towards their higher possibility and not remain the two opposite ends, as if seeming dual ends of existence. And how will this connection be made? That he tells in the coming lines, how this hyphen or the re-wedding has to happen between the consonant and the vowels. Please keep sharing if you have any reflections in between. Keep sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a Upanishad, Mandukya Upanishad is there about this Om actually. We used to read and discuss about those verses in our satsang, but yeah, here it is very clear actually. In 2 or 3 lines, Sri Aurobindo beautifully brought out this meaning of that Om. how you explained, no? It is fully understood now, actually. There they explained in a very philosophical term that Upanishad. But here he brought, Sherdo brought out very beautifully. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, very clear. Yeah, anyone who wants to go next?
The narrow isthmus of the ascending soul. We must renew the secret bond in things. Our hearts recall the lost divine idea. Reconstitute the perfect word. Unite the Alpha and the Omega in one sound. Then shall the spirit and nature be at one.
Yes. So this narrow isthmus of the ascending soul, this will be the connecting link, connecting matter and mind. While our deepest truth is hiding within us, within the matter and the surface consciousness that we are, but it is also involved in the matter. And whatever is involved in the matter can also evolve out of the matter. And psychic being is that part of that divine consciousness which is also involved. It is evolving through the lifetimes and the years, and that's why we develop a psychic personality, because it is involved in the evolution, in the manifestation, although it is coming from the divine consciousness which is absolutely untouched by the mortality or the mortal existence, and yet a part of it is what participates in the mortal realm, in the life that we live here on earth. So this ascending soul, which has plunged itself into the matter and now is evolving out of the matter, the narrow isthmus, and isthmus refers to, imagine that there are two chunks of land like masses, and which are connected by a very narrow mass of land, like a very thin streak of land. Just like, if we look at this bridge that was made, supposed to be made by Hanuman and his, the Vanar Sena for going to Lanka. So they say that they saw this remnants of this bridge in the waters from Lanka and India, between that. So two masses of land, Lanka and India, and in between there is this narrow isthmus which is connecting both. So this ascending soul is like that connecting link. And that's why Mother and Sri Aurobindo stress so much on the importance of go in search of your soul. Find your soul, unite with it. Before that, nothing can happen. And soul appears to us something very enigmatic. Like, I don't know how to even approach it. But Mother and Sri Aurobindo have made it very, very simple. Even many other teachers, like I keep on mentioning Rupert Spira also, because he directly hits at the consciousness itself. Know yourself as the consciousness, is not, and not as the content of consciousness. Content of consciousness is thoughts, feelings, sense perceptions, the desires, ambitions, all the colors that we have in life. That is the content of consciousness. But once I know myself knowingly as the consciousness with which I see a thought, with which I become available to a feeling, with which I sense a body ache or sense perception, more and more I have to know myself as that. Before that, nothing can really take place. So this psychic transformation is a long process. It can be given to us in a blink of an eye, like a taste can be given to us, but the process continues. So in each and every part of our being, we have to establish and know ourselves as that pure consciousness. And that itself is very wide and vast. That is not limited by me and my story. That is not limited by me and what happened to me in my lifetime. That is very, very vast, untouched also. And the moment you enter it, the moment you touch it consciously, you touch, get a taste of peace, stillness, relaxation from suffering. Which you cannot be suffering when you consciously know yourself as this divine light of consciousness, owing to the presence of which I am able to see a thought, a feeling, or a sense perception. Without that, I cannot become aware of anything. Yeah. So this isthmus of ascending soul, this connecting link, this will serve as a hyphen that must connect matter and mind. We must renew the secret bond in things. Now there is already a connection at a deeper level. Since everything is coming down from Satchidananda, where all is one, all is one. So it cannot be that we are separate individuals, disconnected from each other, not understanding each other. So there is already a secret bond that lies beneath our superficial mortal reality, the appearance of forms. There is already a secret bond, but we must renew it. We must tap into that consciousness where I really know by identity that yes, all of this is one. By identity, not by intellectualizing or philosophizing. Knowingly, practically for myself that yes, all this is one. Yeah. And then the more available I get to that higher state of consciousness, the more I become master of my own movements. And then I also can exert influence on the other things which may appear to be separate by form. But since we are all one, I can also exert my influence there. We must renew the secret bond in things. Our hearts recall the lost divine idea. Reconstitute the perfect word, unite. The perfect word is Om. Now we have to reconstitute. We have as if split it apart. One is finite, matter. That's finite. Okay, that's the lower end. I don't want to touch it. Ascetics, that's what they say. So I don't want to touch the body. Body is meaningless. It's like lower. It will always pull you down. So you have separated the M, the matter, the finite, and you have kept away the infinite, which is R and O, which is the open vowels of infinity. So now we have to bring them together. That's what integral yoga is about, of Mother and Sri Aurobindo. So they don't talk about shunning the matter. They talk about refinement of the matter, refinement of your senses, refinement of thoughts, refinement of emotions, and not shunning away of emotions. Reconstitute the perfect word, unite, uniting the R, O, and M. Our hearts recall the lost divine idea. And this is the idea that all is one, and hence there can be a greater harmony when we tap into this higher consciousness, when we ourselves become available to our own truth, our deeper realities, where we are all connected, and there cannot be any war in that consciousness. Wars can only exist when I'm not operating from my higher consciousness. Only there wars and disharmony can exist. But when everything is operating from the highest summit, disharmony is impossible. So whatever disharmony at the moment we have within the being, without the being, like at the level of nations, at the level of family, in relationships, all that disharmony is almost, if I can say, like a propulsion. It propels us to go and unite deeply with ourselves, because all that we want is peace and harmony there. And before touching our own higher consciousness, our own reality, we cannot have true harmony, not even at the level of our family, little units of life. So this connection has to be revived, made. We have to become aware of it. It's not that it is not there. The connection is already there. We have become lost in the finite. So we have to get in touch. We have to expand our inner being, get in touch with the inner being, and reconstitute the perfect word. Unite the alpha and the omega in one sound. Alpha is the first letter of Greek alphabets, and the omega is the last letter. So on a surface level, they may appear like two ends again. They cannot be joined. But here he says, Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Matter is the beginning and the end is the spirit. They have to be one. Alpha and the Omega in one sound. Then shall the spirit and nature be at one. Beautiful words again, and also bring a lot of relaxation in us that this we are all proceeding towards this. It's almost a divine certitude which is there that this has to happen, no matter how many thousands of years it may take. But the journey has begun. Journey has already begun. Then shall the spirit and nature be at one. Then we don't need to say that my nature is very low in consciousness and all that I want is beautiful meditative experiences, because the nature is also then a servant of truth. Nature is also following the dictate of the divine will and not its own sovereign in its own realm. That mind wants to do something else, vital wants to satisfy its own demands and expectations, and body has its own plan. So right now, this is what happens, that every part of our being is just discoordinated, like it has they have their own ideas in mind, and there is no king. So we have to place the king at the proper place, the psychic being, and slowly the nature becomes its slave, follows the dictate. Yeah. And one line, yes, we missed. Two are the ends of the mysterious plan. So as if there is a grand plan in working, which we are not aware of. And they are supposed to be like this. And now they have to evolve so that they can be one. Two are the ends of the mysterious plan. Now, it's beautiful that it's mysterious. Otherwise, the mind can say, I know, So the limited mind can never fathom the mystery. That's the beauty. And it's almost like a wave. If a wave wants to know the ocean, the wave has to sink back into the ocean, become the ocean, and then know itself as the ocean. So just like that, our limited minds have to go back into that consciousness in which, from which they arise as a limited mind, like sink back into that consciousness. That's what we call meditation or touching, making the mind silent. When the mind crashes back into the ocean of the self, there it finds peace. And then when it comes out from that ocean of self, then it is changed in its quality. Something of beauty, it stays with that even limited mind. So more and more higher consciousness becomes a part of that, as if the mind serves as a receptacle almost for that higher consciousness. Yeah, two are the ends of the mysterious plan. Yeah, any reflections here? Any thoughts? Okay.
In the wide, signless ether of the self, in the unchanging silence, white and nude, aloof, resplendent like gold, dazzling suns, veiled by the ray no mortal eye can bear. The spirits bare and absolute potencies burn in the solitude of the thoughts of God.
Yes. So for the mind, it is boggling. That's why we say it's mind boggling. The mind wants to fathom, wants to understand, but the way it wants to understand is a very limited way. And it would never be able to fathom and understand through that limited way. And that's why the importance, again and again, Mother and Sri Aurobindo stress on the importance of quietude and silence in the mind. And again, we have to go through many, many experiences before we get convinced that, yes, this appears to be the best possible way, quietening down the mind. Otherwise, it always remains mind boggling for us, because the limited mind would always try to, and the limited mind has its own purpose in existence. The way I can make sense of finite objects is through the limited mind that I make sense of finite objects. So in finite world, the mind serves as a helper. But when I now want to connect this mind and matter, when I now want to evolve, the nature wants to evolve, connect with the spirit, then the mind always serves as a bar. It's like it serves almost as a brick wall in between. And that's where the silencing of the mind comes into picture, so that it can open itself up to higher planes of existence or mind, which are intuitive planes, the planes of inspiration, the planes of higher mind, and then the overmind, and then even beyond the overmind, the supermind, the direct knowledge by identity. And here he says, in the wide, signless ether of the self, in the unchanging silence, white and nude, aloof, resplendent like gold, dazzling suns, veiled by the ray no mortal eye can bear. Now, as if, the one vision or visual that we can see here is, take here is that imagine that there is a very bright sun, bright most as you can imagine. And then there is a very thick brick wall separating all that dazzling from us. Why? Because we cannot tolerate that dazzling. And slowly, as we grow in our consciousness, we become available that, okay, now I can tolerate a bit more. So the brick wall kind of dilutes, and I become available to that higher light, which was always there. It was just that I was not ready to access it directly. In the wide, signless ether of the self. Ether also refers to consciousness. It's the most subtlest of substance one knows, which cannot be proved by experiments. Scientists have a tough time proving consciousness. Why? Because the tools and techniques that we have as scientists, they are not subtle enough that they can detect consciousness. And that's why many of the sciences earlier used to negate consciousness, that's something like that is always supernatural. You kind of put it into another category that is supernatural. We cannot measure it. So now the science is embracing it as well, because it knows that something more is there. It's just that our tools are grosser, so that they cannot detect it. Imagine that you have a bug on your bed sheet. There is a bug. Now, if I cannot detect the bug by naked eye, that does not mean that the bug is not there. It just tells me that I don't have sensitive eyes, or I don't have a sensitive equipment. So this signless ether of self refers to that consciousness of which everything is made. When consciousness condenses itself, we have the thought. When it condenses itself furthermore, we have the emotional body. When it further condenses itself, we have the physical body. All is arriving from the consciousness. When we say everything was one, and from that one many arose. So that one consciousness from which everything emanated, signless ether of self, wide, vast, unending. In the wide, signless ether of the self, in the unchanging silence. Now that is immutable, unchanging. Everything that changes in the finite world that we live in. People come and go, relationships change, workplace changes, houses are built, houses are thrown away, nature's forces come, take away stuff, new animals are born, new insect species are born. So all that changes happens in the realm of nature. But here in the signless ether of self, everything is unchanging and silent, still, absolute still. In the unchanging silence, white and nude, it's naked. It does not have anything to protect itself, because all that is that consciousness. I would need to protect myself when there is something else than me. Imagine that I am there, maybe a tiger is there. So I feel that something separate than me is there. But when all that is there is that consciousness, why do I need to protect myself? And from what? So it is nude, white, pure. And white also refers to that it has every color. White, when we refer to a white color, when we pass the ray of light through a prism, it disperses itself into all the possible colors. So although it was looking at this white light, but it contained everything. All the possibilities were contained in it. In this unchanging silence, white and nude, aloof, resplendent, full of radiance, like gold dazzling suns, veiled by the ray no mortal eye can bear. So it is veiled. And this veil is referred to in Vedas, in Upanishads, as Hiranyamaya Patra. You maybe some of you may have read or heard about it. It's also called the golden lid. It's on the top of our head. Now, when little children are there, they have a soft spot over their head, which we discussed earlier in few sessions also. And that indicates that they are one with the divine consciousness. The ego it is not encrusted itself upon them. The individuality has yet not developed fully. So that crust is soft. They connected to the pure divine consciousness, supramental consciousness. And yet, as we grow as adults, individuality needs to form. There is a need of individuality in evolution. So that crust thickens, the topmost crust over our skull, it thickens, it hardens. And hence we are separated through ignorance from the divine consciousness. Now, as we grow in our consciousness, it is almost a gradual process of liberation that the golden lid, the lid of the overmind, or the lid of Hiranyamaya Patra Upanishads use this word, it has to be opened. This lid has to break open so that you unite with the divine consciousness. And this, I'll just actually share a screen with you where in very detail all this is given. I want us to maybe go through it once. So this is a page, Oromir WordPress, from where a detailed description of it I found, and it was beautiful to read it, to go through it. Like here,
this is from Ishavasya Upanishad.
Yes. So they also share a Rig Ved verse here. There is a truth, Ritam, covered by an inferior truth, the Tena, where your place is secure, where they unyoke the horses of sun, the 10 hundreds stood together. Where was that one? I saw the greatest of the embodied gods. So this is referring to that golden lid. Then comes what Chitraji was sharing here. The face of truth is covered with a brilliant golden lid that do thou remove, O fosterer, for the law of the truth for sight. So if we truly want this divine sight, the vision, the whole vision, it is not possible that without breaking open this lid, it can happen. Isha Upanishad, verse 15. And Sri Aurobindo talks about this, then Mother also shares about this. Let me just take, in Savitri, again, this line is here. All the gray inhibitions were torn off and broken the intellect's hard and lustrous lid. So it's practically also it's hard lid, how it appears on the skull. It's a hard lid. Yeah. In Life Divine, he touches upon this lid again here. But an overmind, let us go through it. I think it would be nice if we go through this paragraph. At the source of this intuition, we discover a superconscient cosmic mind. So above the plane of intuition, there is this cosmic mind in direct contact with supramental truth consciousness. An original intensity determinant of all movements below it and all mental energies, not mind as we know it, but an overmind that covers as with the wide wings of some creative oversoul this whole lower hemisphere of knowledge ignorance. So overmind serves as a protective lid, this golden lid, because why it needs to be there? Because one needs to grow slowly in consciousness to be available to the supermind directly. So it serves as a veil, which was referred to in the lines which we were reading. Veil no mortal can bear. That veil of ray no mortal can bear. Yeah, it links with that greater truth consciousness, while yet at the same time with its brilliant golden lid, it veils the face of the greater truth from our sight, intervening with its flood of infinite possibilities as at once an obstacle and a passage. So although it appears like a crust which is blocking the view of supermind, but it is also a passage. Appears like an obstacle, but it is also a passage in our seeking of the spiritual law of our existence, its highest aim, its secret reality. This then is the occult link we are looking for. This is the power that at once connects and divides. Look at the beauty, connects and divides the supreme knowledge and the cosmic ignorance. Beautiful lines. Yeah, then he talks about, here a disciple wants to ask, how can one succeed in meditation? And he says, by quietude of mind. Above the mind, there is not only the infinite in itself, but infinite sea of peace, joy, light, etc. above the head. The golden lid, Hiranmaya Patra, intervenes between that which is above mind and what is below. Once one can break that lid, those elements can come down at any time one wills. And for that, quietude is necessary. There are people who get those things. He means the powers from above. There are people who get those things without quietude, but it is very difficult. Yeah, and then he talks about a veil in the heart. Mother talks about the moving of from desire soul to the true soul. Right now, we live in our desires, expectations, demands, and that makes us suffer. So we have to make this movement from the desire soul to the true soul. That's where he talks here that there is a veil or a wall, if you like, the vital with its surface consciousness, emotional with its disturbances, and veils. One has to break through these and get to what is behind them. And behind is the seat of the psychic. In the depths of the heart is the seat of the psychic. Yeah. Here, a veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind, divide us from the divine. So both have to happen parallelly in our life. The opening from the above the mind and the opening of the inner heart. Love and devotion rend the veil. They break the veil. In the quietude of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes. Again, referring to that dissolution of that brick wall. So these are beautiful, I think, descriptions of that golden lid. I thought we'll go over that. Yeah, again, look at this. The crown center open removes the difficulty of the lid between ordinary mind and the higher consciousness above. What we call Sahasrar Chakra, the top of the head. If the Ajna Chakra also is open, the one between the eyes, then it is possible to have a clear communication between the higher consciousness and the inner mind and the outer mind throat center also. The throat center or the Vishuddhi Chakra, the chakra responsible for speech, the clarity in speech, throat center. So slowly with devotion, with love for the mother, love for the divine, all these chakras by themselves, they open. We don't have to kind of put effort, a separate effort in opening these chakras. It's the work of the mother, which slowly as we grow in devotion and surrender, they just slowly open. The channels open and we are able to access the higher states of consciousness also. Yeah. The heart center commands the psychic and the vital. That opening enables the psychic influence to work in the vital and ends in the coming forward of the psychic being. Yeah. Yeah, any reflections to share? Please share if you have anything to share.
Yeah, Monica, in Synthesis of Yoga also we are going through this chapter only about the psychic opening.
Okay.
Yeah, this wonderfully coincides now.
Oh.
And yeah, you just explained about that that mind will get the power from the consciousness, no? Actually, yeah, this exact. I just now I read that line. I will read that.
Yeah.
But also the central consciousness in its turn will take up more and more the outer mental activities of knowledge and turn them into a parcel of itself.
Yeah.
Or an annexed province. Look at this beautiful,
Beautiful.
way. Yeah.
Beautiful. Very
Parcel
resonating.
of itself, yeah, annexed province it seems.
Beautiful.
Then with the central consciousness, yeah. I
Yeah.
just enjoyed these lines. Same line you also explained, no, with
Yeah.
a lot of meaning, yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
It's really beautiful. All Synthesis of Yoga, Sri Aurobindo brought out in Savitri in a poetic form.
Beautiful.
Actually.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm reading these lines, I can easily, connect with some of the Savitri lines. Little I know, I can connect little. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. So then he continues, he says, let us just cover this, and I think rest of it, maybe we can take a few lines and see how it comes. Veiled by the ray, no mortal eye can bear. The spirits bare and absolute potencies burn in the solitude of the thoughts of God. So spirit is full of powers, emanations of full of creative potential, but they are all masked, as if in the middle of ocean we are all thirsty, almost like that. And why? Because it's just a process of growing in our consciousness so that our thirst gets quenched further and further. The way it is designed somehow, that's how it is. The spirits bear an absolute potencies, the powers which reside in more and more knowing ourselves as that consciousness, living as that consciousness. They kind of burn in the solitude of the thoughts of God. So they are just waiting to be harnessed. They're just right here to be accessed, to be harnessed. And they're full of this potencies, the potentialities, the possibilities. And then he talks about these powers. What is the properties of these powers? What are these powers? So let us go through a few lines and maybe then we can end in a few moments. Now he talks about these potencies of the spirit, powers of the spirit. So whoever feels ready.
A rapture and a radiance and a hush, delivered from the approach of wounded hearts, denied to the idea that looks at grief, remote from the force that cries out in its pain. In his inalienable bliss they live.
Yes. So these powers, what are they like? They are as if a rapture, raptured in bliss, full of this delight of being. A rapture and a radiance and a hush, full of bright possibilities, the divine light of consciousness, full of that brightness, the dazzling of the suns, full of that ananda, the rapture, the ecstasy, full of that bliss, and also a hush, absolutely silent and still. So a lot of intensity, a lot of potentiality, and yet full of that stillness of Satchidananda also. Delivered from the approach of wounded hearts. So as if our wounded hearts, since we live mostly from our desire soul, hence we get wounded again and again, we are not able to touch these powers, as if they are away from our approach. When I am living as a desire soul, they are away from our approach, delivered from the approach of wounded hearts, denied to the idea that looks at grief. Now, how we look at grief, ideas coming from the higher domains of mind, how we look at grief, how we in mortal realm involve ourselves in grief as a way of life. That yes, this happens and this is how it is in mortal existence. That rapture, that spirit's potency, that radiance, that hush is all as if I cannot touch it. I cannot touch it. Involved in the day-to-day mortality, I'm always away from that power of the spirit. So grief cannot touch it. The wounded hearts cannot touch it. It's away from that, as if it's veiled. Those powers are veiled from the grief and the wounded hearts. Remote from the force that cries out in its pain. So this evolving vital energy, how we fail, stumble with the blows in our life, again and again fall and then try to come up. In pain, we cry out and we stay away from the spirit potencies. Because why? Because we stay away. Why is he saying that? Because these potencies of the spirit, these powers of the spirit, they are untouched by the wound and the grief and the pain. They are very indifferent. And in that indifference, they're also absolutely drenched in the ananda of, or the bliss of the being, the delight of the being, which is the very basis of existence. They are very loyal servants of truth consciousness. They are untouched and impassive to the cries and the pain and the grief, these powers. In his inalienable bliss, they live. So as if the bliss in which they live, the rapture in which they live, that bliss is inseparable from these powers. Just like water is inseparable from the coolness that it has. Now imagine trying to dissociate the coolness of the water from water itself. You will not be able to do it. We can't do it. Wherever we talk about water, yes, coolness goes along with it. So just like that, their very nature is the nature of bliss. And bliss is inalienable from the powers, the potencies. They cannot be away from that bliss even for a moment. Such is the purity of those potencies of the spirit. And that's why I feel whenever we touch in any glimpse, we are able to touch the spirit in us, in purity. We always remember that taste, that purity, that bliss that was given to us. It's almost inseparable. We cannot separate that bliss and sweetness from that experience. Why? Because it's the very nature of those powers which are coming from the spirit. Very nature is full of peace, silence, and infinite possibilities, the radiance. In his inalienable bliss, they live. So let us take last 4 lines and then we will close after this. Yeah.
Immaculate in self-knowledge and self-power, calm they repose on the eternal will. Only his law they count and him obey. They have no goal to reach, no aim to serve.
Yes. So they are immaculate in self-knowledge. Immaculate means stainless, untouched, untarnished. pure, absolutely pure. They are immaculate, absolutely neat, clean, and almost you can say on the verge of indifference. Immaculate in self-knowledge and self-power. So there is a certain purity with these powers. And this purity is inseparable element. These powers cannot become diluted. Why? Because purity is its very essence of these powers. Bliss is the very essence of these powers. Immaculate in self-knowledge, they're conscious of the knowledge within themselves, immaculate in self-knowledge and self-power, they are aware of their power. Calm, they repose on the eternal will. What is their backing? What is their strength? The divine will is their backing. And that's why they are pure and immaculate, because the divine will is where they lean back upon. They don't lean back upon anything but the divine will. Just like slaves are. Slave is tied to the master. He cannot do anything but what the master suggests. That's what a slave is. A servant is something different. There is a difference, fine line of difference between a slave and a servant. A slave has no choice of his own. While a servant, although he may be subdued in front of the master, but he has a certain choice. But these powers are tied to the truth consciousness. Calm, they repose on the eternal will. Why are they calm? They are calm because they have no other will than the divine will. Why are we restless? Because we also, in the process of our own evolution, we have many, many other wills than the divine will. And it's only through our gradual evolution that we recognize more and more deeply that the only path is the path of conscious surrender. At each and every moment, wherever I find myself weak, definitely I have bought myself into some other will, which is not the divine will. And the moment immediately I recognize the error, the mistake, immediately I correct it, you have your power back. Again, you're a slave of the divine will. Calm. There is a calm, there is a quietude within the being, because there is nothing to be done really. Whatever the divine says will be done. Whatever divine does not say will not be done. So there is a rest. Calm, they repose on the eternal will. Only his law they count and him obey. But there is no other choice they give themselves. We give ourselves many, many choices. But when we are living more and more gradually in the truth consciousness, we see that it's almost a choicelessness that we arrive at. That you don't give yourself choice to get straight. Although having said that, I would also say that even getting straight is the part of the process without which we cannot learn. So we have to go through all the strayings and not strayings, so that more and more conviction on the path arrives and we become more immaculate instruments of the divine. Only his law they count and him obey. They have no goal to reach, no aim to serve. So as if they are absolutely tied with the truth consciousness, they have no agenda for their own satisfaction. A mind, the ego consciousness has its own agendas, which we are not many times even aware of. We just want to prove things. I want this emotional satisfaction, that emotional satisfaction, just for the sake of it, just because I want it. There is this stubbornness in the vital. Just because I want it, it should happen. So for the sake of itself, the mind and the vital and the body, they kind of do torture almost. But here, these powers which are purely directly coming from the spirit potencies, they have nowhere to reach. They don't have any goal or aim, but to serve the eternal will. And hence they are able to maintain that bliss and purity, as if drenched, like you dip something in honey, so that it gets absolutely dipped in the honey, kind of covered with that honey. So almost that kind of a taste, these powers are absolutely dipped in honey and strength, honey of the divine and strength also of the divine will. Because when we do not separate ourselves from the divine will, we actually reclaim our power back. The moment there is a little bit of separation, you see yourself growing weaker. You've given your power away. So I think for me, it serves as a beautiful indicator time and again that the moment I see any weakness which is making me suffer, it's just a sign for me to know that I have again strayed to some little will rather than obeying the higher will, the divine will. And I feel that it's a very long process, arduous journey, easier said than done, because many a times there are things absolutely out of control. Only when they happen, then in retrospect, we realize what is the progress to be made, what is the weakness to be transformed. Yeah, I think we can stop here. Please share if there are any reflections. Okay, so I'm assuming there are none.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks.
joining. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chitra. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.